How'd that go?
I had to Google.
Yeah, there's one for Mac too that I always have to look up.
Do that again.
Okay, we're ready to go again.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. So we just need to recap what has already occurred since there was no sound going out on our live video. The board was asked to consider the following minutes, which would have been February 18th, March 11th, and March 18th. Mrs. Tarson, can you tell us the vote?
The vote was, Mrs. Kristen Smith made a motion, Mrs. Candace Raymond second. Voice vote was unanimous.
General fund check listing.
Mrs. Kristen Smith made the motion, Mrs. Raymond second, and motion carried 6-3.
2021 treasurer's report.
Mr. Polakowski had arrived. Mrs. Kristen Smith made the motion. Mrs. Candace Raymond, second. Motion carried, 7-2.
March 2021 board summary report.
Mrs. Kristen Smith made the motion. Mrs. Heather Smith, second. Motion carried, 7-2. There were no discussions on any of the items.
Thank you. Mr. Masha, I'm going to ask you again to give your superintendent report.
Dr. Clara and I are working on posting a COVID tracking tool to the district website to keep the community updated on the status of our district's COVID cases. That tool should be up and running tomorrow. A reminder to parents and students that students in grades 3 through 8 will be taking the PSSA test next week. That would be the language arts. A reminder also about COVID. Please wear masks. Notify the school of any potential cases, and please keep students home if they are experiencing symptoms. And a very heartfelt thanks goes out to our nursing staff. That would be Mrs. Palagas, Mrs. Yonke, and Mrs. Geiger. They have been working tirelessly in keeping our schools up and running with this COVID resurgence, and they have been working very, very hard, and I really thank them for all their efforts. I would also like to thank Dr. Clara, Mr. Pushkar, and Mr. Smithola for helping with recording the board meetings. And next, on May 3rd, I will be presenting to the board a potential administrative reassignment for the 2021-2022 school year, which will include Dr. Clara, assistant to the superintendent, Mr. Krofcheck, the high school principal, Mrs. Sutton, the middle school principal, Mrs. Kuhar, the elementary principal, and Mr. Haichu, director of special ed, and the SPC principal. And that is all I have.
Mr. Masha, could we also mention that, is it next Wednesday, April 21st, that is a remote learning day?
Yes, there is, teachers will be having an in-service on the 21st, so that would be a remote learning day for our students in all buildings.
And that will not be any live classes?
That will not be live classes. Teachers will be in service.
Thank you, Mr. Masha. We are currently in the process of evaluating the superintendent, and I would like to schedule an executive session to give time to review the evaluation with Mr. Masha, and that will be scheduled for April 26th at 7 p.m. And that will be here at the high school. Pending any building closures, it may have to be moved. I have also asked Mr. Polakowski to chair the committee to review the evaluation and possibly come up with a new tool to use for the evaluation. And I asked him if he would please pick the committee. Do you have that ready, Mr. Polakowski?
The only committee member so far is Mrs. Kristen Smith.
Okay.
If anybody else is interested, let me know. You don't need that, those names tonight, right?
No, I don't need them tonight. And then after the evaluation on the 26th, we should have some good information to move forward on that.
When do we need to have that, between the committee and Asha? So we have one finalized. If I have a date, something like a ballpark, that would be good for me, so I have a goal to get
Okay.
it done.
Did you bring your evaluation this evening?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Do you think these would be an evaluation tool for next year and goals for next year? So we would have to have it done by the end of this school year.
Yes.
That's the ultimate end
Okay,
of,
yeah.
Fiscal year.
so it doesn't have to be like the end of April.
So if we can have it by maybe the first meeting in June?
Sounds good.
I think that sounds good. Are you okay with that, Mr. Masha?
Thank you.
This is Sutton's change in 10 to 12-month principal on the May 13th.
Yes, it will.
Business manager, budget report.
We discussed various items at last week's meeting, and I'm preparing an extensive update for our upcoming special budget hearing. I'll probably have it out early next week. And one of the items to pass on to you is that the Central Westmoreland Career Technology Center will be passing their budget and then sending it to all the member school districts. And our contribution for next year is $470,039.37. Our contribution for the current year is $477,764.44. So that's a decrease of about $7,724. And that'll be one of the changes I'll be reflecting when I send out this updated budget recap summary. That's all. Thank you.
Will that recap be going out before the May 3rd meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Mr. Morial, in the present budget, when you add to the tax, can you please tell us again the amount of money that will be raised in the tax?
It's approximately $623,000.
623,000?
Yes.
I thought you told us at the beginning of this year it was 300 some thousand, and that's what it was last year too.
That was from my January spreadsheet, so that was a very early forecast. The facts and figures changed once I put in all the data that was needed by PDE and issued the new summary. The program recalculated the millage rates, and I entered them into our system, the expected proposed property taxes, and that's what it calculated out to be.
What was last year's tax increase?
I'd have to review that.
Well, it was about 300 some thousand, right?
It might have been.
So what changes that drastically?
Well, one thing, the tax base, assessed millage rates did increase. Collections, current collections are higher than they were last year. That contributed to it. Market values have improved. So all those contributed to a better realization using the Act 1 tax increase. And of course, your Act 1 tax increase is working on a new base, as opposed to last year's was working on a previous year base. So, there's, call it a compounding effect.
So this year we have an extra $620,000
No,
with the tax increase.
this is for next year, 21, 22.
Correct. For next year's budget, raising the taxes will get us an extra $623,000.
Estimated, yes.
That comes from 3.5 meals, is that right?
Well, it's a 4.1%, but the program, as I explained, and I'll send copies out to you, it recalculates the new millage rates. It does a process in the school code called the multi-county rebalancing. So we have 2 counties with 2 different assessed valuations. They each have 2 different property values as set by the state tax equalization board. So the program establishes the new millage rates. Now, whether you approve those or not, you could take away some of that projected increase to lower the millage rates. The program also tells you what the maximum rate can be under Act 1. Right now, I have it tweaked so that both rates are slightly below the Act 1 rate because it's hard to use the term finagle that software to get it to come out exact. You can't tell that program what millage rate you want. It calculates it. So, and that's good news. Certainly not bad news.
So, Mr. Marno, I have a couple questions. If you look at the PDE 2028 and it calculates out a higher index, well, higher millage rate for Fayette County than what was actually approved last year. So which millage rate will be approved? If we...
It would be the rate that is not in excess of Act 1.
Which would be last year's millage rate. We would be going off of what was approved last year, though, correct? Not the millage rate in the PD 20.
You would be going by what the program calculates when you produce. First, there's the proposed final budget in May, and then if any factors should change, which I doubt they are, then it would recalculate it when you enter their system and you do the final budget. There's steps in their process. So you have to go in there, you enter a few variables into their program, and then it re-crunches all that data, resets the millage rates.
Did the millage rates change from January?
No.
So
No, you set the millage rates at the end of last June, so they're in effect for the whole school year.
I guess, I mean, I still don't. We've been operating under the assumption for the past, since I've been on the board, that raising the taxes to the maximum amount gives us about $300,000.
Well, you remember I had disclaimers on that spreadsheet back in January. It was just
Well, that's
a
what it was
spreadsheet.
last year. Was that the actual amount last year, or was it 600 some?
No, it wasn't 600.
So if you're taking PDE 2028 from last year and PDE 2028 from this year, and you subtract them and you get a dollar value, should that not be the dollar value of the tax increase?
No.
Okay.
Well, no, we're just absolutely stunned with the significant difference between the 2 figures. We've been having budget meetings based on one set of figures and actual.
Well, I thank God that the actual is higher than what was estimated on my spreadsheet in January. I can't imagine the grief I would take if it was the reverse. If I told you it was 600,000 and the state calculated was only 300,000. Oh my God.
No, we're not arguing with you. We're just saying we're stunned. We're stunned.
Well, I wouldn't call it stunned.
No, I'm stunned, for sure.
Okay, then you're stunned in a good way. It's
I
good
don't
news.
know. We've been operating and planning and meeting with groups.
Well, that's why the budget process is an ongoing process. So as facts and figures change, new facts come in that overwrites the old estimates. So then you just have to keep rolling forward. So you have new facts, you have new figures, and you just have to continue until you get to that May proposed final budget, and then anything would change between May and June, you update it for the June final. That's just how the budget process works. It's not a stated process. What you say in January, early January, is not what's going to happen
No,
for final budget.
I'm not talking about, I know the budget process is very fluid and it changes from week to week. I'm talking about specifically what tax increase we can get. I didn't think that could change from 1 month to the next. So can you explain how that changes?
I really can't. Other than my spreadsheet is not an accurate spreadsheet compared to the state program. It's a simple spreadsheet, and it doesn't have the embedded algorithms like the state program has for multi-county rebalancing. It works great when your school district is in a single county. All its properties are in a single county. So if we were all Westmoreland County, it would probably be spot on, if not pretty darn close.
So back to the.
For me, it's a planning tool. It's not something I make the final, because again, it changes. And normally it's not done that early in January.
So my confusion is this again, that you're saying that your spreadsheet is not as accurate as the state spreadsheet.
So that's very correct, yes.
Okay, so where on the state spreadsheet do I see $624,000?
Well, you don't. So you have to input your expected tax increases based on what that program calculates. And then it's the difference between what we had budgeted and what is to be expected. So it turns out to be about $600,000.
Michelle, the concern I have is that several months ago, this board had its back to the wall about voting all these deadlines about Act 1, Act 1, Act 1, Act 1. And we were doing that under a 2 set of numbers.
Correct.
About Act 1. So that whole Act 1 thing may have not been correct. And the fact that, the rest of the board has put in such a huge tax increase, that doesn't seem to be necessary. I just go back to that Act 1 thing and how we were forced to make these decisions. There were hours of discussion about that, but we weren't talking about the amount of money that we're talking about now.
Well, your decision was one of two tracks to take. You either go down the Act 1 budgeting timeline, which was by such and such date in February, you passed a preliminary proposed Act 1 budget, or you opted out, like we did, and you go down the traditional budgeting timeline.
But Jim, what came out of that is we ended up putting the maximum amount of tax increase under Act 1 into the budget. I mean, no one will deny that. That's what's in there. And we probably would not have put those kinds of numbers in there knowing that we were going to get $250,000,000.
Well, you can remember, we had more than that in there, because we were trying to kick out a preliminary proposed budget that would force a public referendum vote to try to go in excess of Act 1. Remember, that was original thinking in December and early January. The thinking was maybe we should go to a public referendum vote. Now, the only way to do that is you have to put in that program more tax dollars than an Act 1 increase will give you, and then that would open up the door to, okay, you do not qualify for any referendum exceptions, so the only exception, the only way you would have to increase taxes greater than the Act 1 index was to go to a public referendum vote. And the decision was, well, we don't want to do that. We want to opt out because, referendum vote would more than likely 99% fail. I don't think any is passed in a Commonwealth.
I don't think our board ever considered referendum. But what I'm saying is when they chose...
Well, I know we discussed it, but I don't think there was any serious consideration to actually do it.
There was serious consideration, and it was with the assumption that our taxes would only bring us $300-some thousand.
Well, you got to remember that tax one, even the current that's calculated would not have brought you enough to have balanced that early, very preliminary proposed budget. You needed way more tax dollars than that.
And that's where, and I will say what I said before.
We had a deficit of $1.9 million. So even throwing in another $300,000, you still would have had a deficit of $1.6 million. You would have had to raise $1.6 million more in taxes, which would have put you over the Act 1 index, which would have put you to a public referendum vote in the primary.
Well, and I'll say what I said then was that I was expecting a preliminary budget that actually gave us a look at what we were forecasting, not a let's see how much we can put in it to get the referendum. I wanted to see if we needed the referendum. I think that's maybe where we're differing in this.
Well, I think it's a good thing that you didn't go down that track, because unknown to us in January is the two ESSER funds that are coming, $4.7 million. I think that would have been a political disaster to have on their referendum vote to increase taxes over the Act 1 rate, and you're getting $4.7 million from the federal government. So I think it worked out in our favor that we didn't go that route.
Are you able to show us where the how you arrived at $624,000?
Well, I will try.
I mean, I know I've talked to you about it over the last couple of days, and I've spent hours looking at this. I just don't understand how we all were under the assumption of $396,000 was an Act 1 increase, and that we were around that dollar amount last year. And no way, no how can I calculate anything following the formulas to get to $624,000.
Yes, we discussed it at length on the telephone.
We did, and I still don't understand. So if I need to call PDE, I will do that, but I think you and I should be able to look at that and...
Mr. Botonic will remember, was it 3 years ago, we spent considerable time with Mr. Van Haft at PDE talking about that very page, multi-county rebalancing, how complicated it is, and even the weakness in their form, because it does not take into account separating out your municipalities. It aggregates your Fayette County properties, it aggregates your Westmoreland County properties. It goes with weighted averages. So even they recognize that the form does need to be changed, and they will over time. But it's the tool we have to work with. And I can remember, Mr. Botonic, we went from emails back and forth with Harrisburg, plus we even had a lengthy phone conference call with that gentleman from Harrisburg.
We did.
So there are just some, let's say, mysteries in life that maybe we're just not going to understand.
I'm going to try to comment on this, and I hope I don't make it more confusing, but I'm not saying that I have a perfect grasp of everything that is being discussed right now, insofar as, you know, the way our computer system works and the way the state's computer system works, but there appears to be imperfection in the way that the state system deals with the calculation for the school districts that have two different counties within them in trying to perfectly manage the equalization of millage, not in the sense that you have the same millage rates, but that rather they go up proportionately based upon the market values for the two different the districts in the two different counties. The other thing is that, the discussion about the possibility of pursuing a referendum by doing a proposed preliminary budget. Now, there has been in the past an attempt, and it was done, to do a proposed preliminary budget because we were eligible for an increase that is sort of a misnomer in a way. It's called the special education exception, and it's based upon comparing changes in those numbers, and we qualify for those. Now, absent that, if you start from the supposition that you might want to do a proposed preliminary budget, given the limitations of our system, I think what Mr. Marnell is saying, and I apologize, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to, make this clear in my own mind too. You almost have to do it backwards. You have to start with a number that is big enough that you know will generate a need for that in order to be able to do the calculations within the program.
Yes, that is one of the problems with the program is, and we went over this several years ago, you cannot tell that program exactly what millage rate you want. You can't say, we only want to go up 1 mil. It does not allow you to do that. It allows you to put in an anticipated amount of tax revenue you think you need to receive. You can put in there your estimated collection rates, weighted average collection rates for each county. You can put in the latest taxable assessed value. I call both counties and I got a, initial report that I started with, and I will call them and update again before we go into the May. And let's see, it asks you some other questions like review following, did you do any, county do any reassessments or something? No. So those are the basic variables you're allowed to enter. You cannot tell it that you want a specific millage increase. We've had problems in the past where our school board said, we're not raising taxes, we're not changing our tax rates, we're going to leave the millage where it is. But that program, call it, has a mind of its own. It has its own calculation based on the law, rebalancing tax burdens between the two entities.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it recalculates rate. So in the past, I would take my red pen and I would write in our existing millage rate with a note. The board voted not to raise taxes, and I would send in a copy of the resolution stating that there would be no tax increase. Send it to Harrisburg, they would review it and say, okay, fine, you're not going with the rebalancing, although, as Mr. Half said, you really should stick with that program, because if you don't, you will go awry, so further and further away from where, the theoretical new millage rate should be. So we decided, our answer was that we needed to raise taxes. We did it in 18. We didn't do it in 17. We did it in 16. We didn't do it in 15. We did some in 14. We didn't do any in 13. So, those no tax years, you ignored what the program generated, because we're not raising taxes. We're not changing tax rates. So once we raised taxes in 18, we've now been using the program, so to speak, to generate the millage rates we needed so that we don't exceed the economic index. Now, if you get to the point where you say we don't want to raise taxes, well then, we're going to be going back to, writing in red ink, making a note and sending it to Harrisburg to say, look, we're not raising taxes. They don't have that scenario in that program yet, where you can just check off and say we're not raising taxes. They need to have that, and they need to have a few other things in that program. For example, we only want to go up one even mill, rather than whatever the program calculates, because it goes out to 4 decimal points. And that causes problems when you're doing property transactions. Not that calculators can't handle that, but so it's not a perfect system. And a simple Excel spreadsheet doesn't match what that program does, because the spreadsheet does not handle the two counties, the change in market value. That's a critical factor that they have buried in their program. It's the market value that's given by STIBE, the State Tax Equalization Board. That's an important factor.
It is possible that if you decided not to do a millage increase, that because of changes within the market values and the resulting assessment calculations as between the two counties, that you could have a situation where one county remained flat and the other county could either, and I'm forgetting which way it would either go up or down, even though you decided to remain flat, because of that additional factor of the degree of changes within the two separate counties. That's probably the most I'm going to be able to coherently describe to you tonight based upon the generality of the conversation and what I know.
Mr. Marino, did you say we're getting $4.3 million from the federal government?
It's actually around 4.7.
$4.7 million.
Yes, there's the ESSER 2 funding, which is somewhere around 1.4 to 1.5 million, and then there's this ESSER 3, which is another 3 point something million, and then there's talk of a fourth phase that may be coming out. So,
why do we need to raise taxes?
well, theoretically speaking, if you set up like a debate stage, much like high school debate teams do, you could have 3 board members on one side take the stand, well, we need to raise taxes, another 3 or 4 take the other side, we don't need to raise taxes, and have a good debate. And then maybe somebody makes a judgment and says, well, you know what, this team won the debate. It's really it's subjective. It's how you see yourselves down the road. Once you're past all this stimulus spending, all this stimulus money that's coming in, where would you like your future tax millage rates to be? We have no effect on assessed value. Those are assessed by property transactions and building, and that's the county that does that. The only effect we have on property taxes is the millage rate. So it's where you see yourself, let's say, in 3 years, when this ESSER funding runs out, because you have up to 3 years to spend it. I think through the end of September 2023, or maybe it's 2024. I'm not sure. So
23.
23.
Raising taxes. I mean, this budget includes the maximum tax increase for everyone.
Yes, theoretically, you could say, look, we could go in the budget book and find $600,000 worth of stuff to use the ESSER money on, because there's language in there that you could say, provide principals and school buildings and materials needed for blah, blah, blah. Money's provided so that you do not have to furlough staff. You could talk about furloughing staff. You may even have some calculations somewhere where you were going to calculate X number of dollars of potential furloughs. You could say, well, we're not going to furlough those people. Now we've got ESSER money to keep them employed. That was the intent of this money, was to stop the furloughing of individuals, because it puts a greater and greater burden on these overtaxed unemployment compensation systems. It's looking at the national picture. Their intent to get this economy shooting forward, and you can see the signs. They're out there. I was counting trains the other night. I counted 7 trains in a span of less than an hour and a half passing through in Greensboro, where several weeks ago there was 5 on the same Friday evening, on a Friday evening. So things are picking up.
What about the taxpayers?
Well, I agree with you there. I mean, I have an 86-year-old mother. She doesn't want any more tax increases. She doesn't want to pay taxes anyway, and I don't blame her. So that's what you have to debate as a board. A governing body, your legislators, so to speak. So you have to debate. Somebody else has to debate, and then the decision has to be made. Who wins the debate? Do we raise taxes or do we not raise taxes?
What the board will be dealing with and having to decide this year, and actually, next year and the year after, is whether or not reoccurring expenses are being matched by reoccurring revenues. And it appears that there may be some relatively small portions of the ESSER's monies that can be used to cover some existing expenditures that you have, primarily, the way I understood it, for that rental payment that you have for the Chromebooks. I think
Yes,
that's pretty well established.
That's one of my items that's going to be on my update sheet. We got a true payoff figure, and we've set the payoff figure for August 1st, so that'll give the new business office a reorganized and time to make that payment. It's actually,
But you can't use those kinds of monies like to go make a bond payment,
right?
Or
so you have to
pay for your regular stuff, your regular expenses.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. So
You might be able to use it to hire your new custodial supervisor, because you still need to do thorough cleaning of your facilities.
Okay.
So, right?
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Marnell. I'm not sure that it'd be wise to me, it's like a bonus. If I don't get bonuses at my job, but if I would get a $1,000 bonus this month, I'm not going to go out and buy a truck that the payment is $700 a month because I can afford it this month. That would be silly, because I can't afford it next month. You don't get a bonus every month. That's kind of how I'm looking at this money. If we hire someone that we're going to be paying for every year and we don't get this bonus every year, how do we keep that up then?
Well, granted, and as finance offices across the Commonwealth have been exchanging thoughts and ideas on this. The fact that there is a run-out time, so theoretically speaking, if I understand correctly, we could be spending ESSERs 2 right now. I don't know if the grant is, I don't know if the paperwork is done, if it's approved, but you could, as I understand, you can do partial submissions. Say, okay, we want to start spending $200,000, and then. But anyway, the thought is you take that chunk of money, let's say ESSER's 2 around, I'm just rounding up $1.5 million. So you got the 21-22 fiscal year, and you got the 22-23 fiscal year, up to and including the end of September of 2023. So you're a quarter into the next fiscal year. So you could say, okay, you know, of that $1.5 million of ESSER 2, we're going to spend, you know, $750,000 next year, and then we're going to reserve the other $750 for the next year, or let's say 700, whatever. And then we're going to spend the rest of it in that first quarter of the 23-24 school year. The same thing with ESSER's 3. I think its run out is the same, September of 2023. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that's what people are talking about. We're not going to spend it all next year, but we want to plan it, phase it in.
I had a meeting, we had a meeting, an advocacy day for the Pennsylvania School Board Association. We met with a couple of our representatives, and that was a big topic that we were discussing, is that if you use this money for salaries or for reoccurring expenses, in a couple years you're going to have a huge cliff that you're going to fall off of, and you're not going to have that income all of the sudden. What do you do? There's also talk that state funding could go down next year. They're worried that people are going to see all this money that came in, and people are going to think, well, they don't really need that much because they got all this money. So there's a lot of different factors, I think, that play into this.
Well, you're making good cases for keeping a tax increase in. Dr. Fike would make a case for not keeping it in, and others. I don't know how that would split out. So yes, I mean, there are factors to be concerned. And these are good questions, you know, especially this ESSER funding. It's brand new. It's right here now to ask your future business manager during your interviews. It's a real live problem. They're having to deal with it in the districts where they're coming from. So I'm sure they're talking about at their current districts, what are their plans? You might pick up some great ideas that we haven't thought of yet.
Mr. Masha,
Looking at information from PSBA in the mail, 1 out of 3 school districts in the state of Pennsylvania is not raising taxes at all. 1 out of 3 is not raising taxes.
I think.
The last budget I got was dated January 29th or something. Is that the last one we got? So I guess I really don't know what we're talking about. I'm not seeing. I just don't know. I can't even comment because I feel lost.
I think that part of our problem is before the ESSER's money, before this pandemic, financially, this school district was probably saved because of a pandemic. We had people here talking to us about being in financial recovery. Mr. Patonic warned of being in financial recovery. We were saved by a pandemic. I mean, that's the honest to God's truth here. So I don't know where we stand. I don't think anybody here knows exactly where we stand. And the paperwork we were going off of showed a $396,000 increase, and now we're talking about a $624,000 increase.
Well, actually,
there should be
the last update, which was on March 31st, and again, we've had conversations like Tuesday afternoon, so you know this number will change, and that's the summary I'm putting together. But we were down to a deficit of only $385,000, and that's still with that tax increase in there.
So, I mean,
So the picture has improved considerably since where we started in early January.
Okay, moving on unless anybody has anything else.
I did want to ask, Mr. Masha, do you think it would be possible for our budget meeting to get maybe an update from the ESSER's group that's
Yes.
meeting as to what they're discussing using the money for?
Yeah, I know that Dr. Claire's working on that
Okay,
right now.
thank you.
Any other comments? Solicitor information?
Because we sometimes have awkwardness over getting started with a motion and wanting to discuss it in advance, I think I'd take this opportunity to explain the developments with the full-service network proposal, which was presented by Mr. Pushkar ably at your previous meeting. And at that point, we did not have their fine print contract language and some additional information. So I have been working with Mr. Pushkar, Mr. Marnell, and Mr. Blake at Full Service And I have in front of you now, which you didn't have last week, which is the actual contract. And the smaller form is an addendum to go with it, which I have been negotiating with Mr. Blake and through him with their attorney. So you have on the second page their fine print terms, which you didn't have last week. And so in the addenda, there are additions or changes to that. There is a provision in here that if you get to the end of 60 days prior to the end of the term, which is a 5-year term, and you don't do anything, it automatically renews. So I see a problem with that in that if you don't get enough information and you sort of fall into that, you could have an issue. So in number 1, there's a requirement that you have to give them notice. So you could start off the agreement by saying that there is, you're giving them the notice of non-renewal right from the beginning. And you have the ability then to get prices from them and get prices from other providers when you get close to the end of that. Now, you should still diary this and go out probably a good maybe 110, 115 days prior to the end of the contract 5 years from now and start to deal with that. Taxes and pass-through charges, we just clarified that if they are provided with a signed exemption certificate from dealing with Pennsylvania sales tax, that then you won't be charged for that. Concerning, they had a provision in there that they could pick either Allegheny County or any other location in Pennsylvania, and I didn't like that idea. So we agreed with it. It could either be Allegheny County or Westmoreland County. It could be if you had a dispute that had to be litigated. And then under item 4, they're a public utility, so they're already obligated to follow our requirements insofar as clearances. They will provide certificates of workers' comp and general liability insurance for when you're involved with their employees. There is a force majeure clause here. However, practically speaking, it's going to be a really rare occasion to avail yourself of that. But it does not relieve you of the obligation to make the recurring monthly charges. If there was some other aspect of the agreement, it may be possible to use that for that reason. The agreement shouldn't be modified unless it's done in writing. They must comply with, their employees must comply with our, clearances that are required by the state. I did put in some language here that the assigned employees or subcontractors they will not permit them to possess or utilize alcohol, tobacco, vaping, or utilizing illegal drugs or marijuana on school district's property. The paragraph 5 is an important development in that the window of installation that is being planned is between July 1 and August 13. I think Mr. Pushkar is planning on July. All he will have to do is to send them a notice, to give them advance notice, and he can pick it based upon what's going on with your other developments. Additionally, you do have the right to advance, to earlier do the high school if you run into a problem. Now that does create another problem, and that is if you really needed it done on a super duper rush and they had to pay overtime hours, you would be charged for that. If it could be more planned, you might be able to modify that so that it wouldn't actually be generating additional costs. But that's spelled out in here now so that you understand how that's going to work. I did put in a provision that if school teachers or staff are off on summer break at the time of the planned or advanced installation, that FSN agrees to provide an additional training date during in-service days prior to the start of school without additional costs to the district. So it may be that they would be training, the high school at one point for some of the folks like clerical staff and whatnot, and then still be able to come back and train the teachers while you're doing in-service. And because of COVID and everything, that we can't always, be 100% sure that that's going to occur at the end of August. So we created a window here from late August or early September.
Mr. Patonic, really quick, in that paragraph, number 5, should that be July 1st, 2021?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good. Are you available tomorrow?
Yeah, I actually have interviews tomorrow.
Okay, I can catch up with you sometime. Okay. And then the other important thing is that the rates that they're charging you in there, there's a one-time per building fee of $199. So that's not a monthly charge. That was lower down on that page. And I know we had to go through this. You see these charges in the big section here for digital phone bundle, monthly for 50 phones, PBX functionality, monthly for 50 phones, and then business analog line. These are all monthly charges. And depending upon how many phones you have in the building, the rates on the far-hand side will be slightly different. The one that says digital phone one-time activation fee one time, that's not per phone, that's per building location. Okay? And as a billing problem, Mr. Marnell and I were dealing with this, if they did a building early, what would happen is you would get interim billing for just the service function. And then when you have the last building installed, you start the 60 months for everybody. So that's one area where you would, in effect, have, I don't know that you can say that it's an extra charge. You're replacing Consolidated with these folks for that, building. But then on the other hand, Consolidated may, I don't know what's going to happen if the phone system doesn't work and they want to, and Consolidated wants to bill you. That may be an area of controversy. So, and then at the end, I gave you a copy that they had approved that apparently they missed 2021 also, Mrs. Raymond. So I'll have to bring that to their attention tomorrow. So with all of that, I would be looking for approval so that this could be online, that if you needed to do the high school early, or you've got definitely the planning here to get a summer project done with this. None of the dollar values changed. The other item I wanted to address a little bit was that within the concept of doing DELERTA, Mr. Palatovich and I mentioned this in the memorandum, or a little note that I gave you, do have a concern that based upon the statute, there is supposed to be a public hearing by the governing body, which in this case would be Scottsdale Borough. We're a taxing district. They're also a taxing district, but they're the ones that have to hold a public hearing. And the last one of those was a long time ago. Mr. Faltovich thinks it was like 2 LERGAs ago in the 1990s. And that we're feeling not legally safe in proceeding without following that prescription, which is in the statute. So I think the concept here is for our representative to work with the borough and their representative. And I think rather than just limiting the buildings that were listed on that one page and that are now in board docs, you could actually develop deteriorated area districts, either to include those or maybe to have some additional one-offs to cover those, and have the potential for encouraging more improvements and having a bigger plan. The other little technicality here is that if you literally follow the statute, it talks about having for a specific location a deteriorated properties, up here, deteriorated properties, an industrial, commercial, or other business property owned by an individual located in a deteriorating area as hereinafter provided, or any such property which has been the subject of an order by a government agency. So if you declare a deteriorated area, you actually might end up with encouraging improvements on even more properties. But if you only go with individualized deteriorated properties, you're limiting yourself. And what's going to happen, because I asked him this question, they don't like to go and issue governmental orders if they don't have a plan about what to do next. You can see what has been going on with the FOE for years. So once you come up with this concept, if they need to do that, then they'll be motivated and know that it's not like going to not lead somewhere. It's sort of like, I guess, the condition, like if you get everything lined up and you have the potential for it being improved, then it makes sense to go and be doing these extra things to make these declarations, and they have to spend some money to get it. It's not a huge amount, but they have to go through some loopholes to get those things accomplished. So the concept looks like both bodies are interested in, but it might take a little bit longer this way because it's going to take another step or two, but you could end up with a better result and a legally safer result.
Do we have to do anything to approve you working on this, or you can just keep moving forward?
Well, I'll help as much as I can. I think really what needs to be done is, I don't know if you need a formal resolution or not. Mrs. Smith has been working and could potentially continue to work with them to sit down and maybe come up with a map.
Okay.
And then bring it back and, see what people think of it.
I'm willing to do that.
Because it seems like you and Mrs. Colbank at the borough, and at some point it may mean even, you meeting with borough council, and if I need to be involved, I will be.
Okay.
But I don't have to be the decision person about which building to pick or what area.
So we need
I
that
think that should be
first.
more a representative's function from the board to be involved with that.
I'm happy to do that unless someone else would like to.
There was one more thing, I apologize. I don't completely understand this pathway, but the borough solicitor believes there is a way, especially when you get into this deteriorated area concept, of dragging along some additional properties with it that might have the potential to be actually residential properties, even though you don't start off with being able to target that. And we talked for 45 minutes and ran out of time on a phone call, so that's another discussion maybe. Thank you.
Is that all you have?
That's all I'll comment on now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to board reports. CWCTC report. Mr. Carson is not here this evening. WIU report. Mrs. Smith.
I was unable to attend because we had a board meeting.
PSBA liaison report.
Yeah, I have a few things this evening, actually one thing. An amendment was put into the House Bill 605 that would provide limited protection for schools from frivolous or opportunistic lawsuits that allege exposure to COVID. This was something that was presented before but was vetoed. So the House of Representatives passed the House Bill 605 as amended. The bill now moves to the Senate for consideration, and they won't be in session until Monday, April the 19th. The bill, if approved, would provide a temporary grant of immunity for actual or potential COVID exposure in the school, unless exposure is the result of gross negligence. So I just wanted to bring that up. Hopefully that'll pass, and school districts will get a little bit of a immunity for that. That's all I have for this evening.
Committee reports. Mrs. Rhodes, you're on the
Budget Finance.
Committee.
Okay, we had a meeting on Tuesday, and we continued to discuss items that we could remove from the budget, and then we discussed items that would have to be added back in. One uncertainty is what contracts. We have the 4 contracts that are we'll be dealing with, and we don't know what the amount of that will be. We talked about repairs that need to be addressed, like the SBC roof. And there was $44,000 in the budget from last year, so we could maybe apply that to some of the repairs that need to be done. I know there's paving that has to be done. We also talked about the track and the tennis court repairs. That has to be addressed, and of course, then we'll have to decide what direction we want to go with that. So that was the highlights of, I think, of the meeting. If anybody else, Mrs. Williams, do you have any comments, or Mr. Masha wanted to add anything, or Mr. Cornell? I think we went over some of the stuff that Mr. Cornell talked about. So that's about all I have for that.
Mrs. Smith, personnel and policy.
Yes, we met last month, and we are continuing to go through the policies. The 800s are posted and ready to be voted on. We did a couple in the 100s and 200s and the 832. I would like to be able to vote to form that, not committee, I guess it's a group that we had talked about last week around policy 832. And we are also continuing to go through employees who do not have a official job description and title. So we have been going through those. We've been contacting some of the employees. Another thing that we've kind of been working on is an agreement, a plan, that would cover those who are not in a current agreement or contract or plan. So we are working very hard to make sure that every employee of the district is covered under some sort of umbrella with very specific benefits listed and everything about their job.
Academic and non-academic is Mrs. Love, Mr. Carson, and myself. I have not been able to attend, I think, the last 2 meetings because of my work schedule, and neither of them are here to share an update. Buildings and grounds, Mr. Polakowski.
We're going to meet April 21st, so
Mrs. Smith, transportation and athletics.
Again, we had another board meeting, so we remain on.
Thank you. Okay, budget updates. Do you have anything further, Mr. Marnell, other than your?
I'll pass out the latest update from Berkheimer, our countywide income tax collector. Very, very pleased with the budget.
Is there one for me?
Yes, there's plenty.
Plenty.
There's plenty.
Extras.
Put a red tick mark next to East Huntington Township. You can see that they are improving. They're in a positive change. So when you look at across the schedule, we've got the end of March of 2019, the end of March of 2020, the end of March of 2021. So the numbers are improving. And of course, there's the year-to-date numbers. So 2021 compared to 2020. They're up 3.09%. And you can look above there or below there, you can see some communities that are now popping up in the positive, but some are still in the negative amount. Like Monaco Borough, nearly down 14%. Coke Township, 14 cents. City, nearly 32%. Then, of course, right below Huntington is Everson Borough, so a little borough. Small amount of nursing, but still very important for those folks. Comparing end of March this year to last year, they're up 7.27%. So excellent. Now on the reverse side, I put a tick mark next to Scottsdale Borough again, the same situation. They had just peaked out on the positive side. This March to last March, positive of 0.35%. And then I put Southmoreland School District in the bracket. We are up 2% over where we were last year. And even last year, at the end of March, which was during the pandemic, we were still up over 2019. So again, very good sign. And then below it is Upper Tyrone Township. They're positive, now 1.79%. So the situation is improving for our community and for our district. So that is excellent news on that earned income tax. That's all I have.
Further discussion? Is there anything else we need to? Contract for paraprofessionals.
Board of Directors directs the Superintendent, Solicitor, Director of Special Education, and Personnel Committee to draft a written, and the word agreement is there, but on advice of Mr. Botonic, we're going to use the word plan for district-employed paraprofessional services. The plan should specify job description, schedule, compensation, and benefits, as well as any other language deemed necessary.
I need a motion.
I will make that motion.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 2 absent.
Resolution to reject proposals for paraprofessional services.
Be it resolved that, number one, the school board rejects the proposal of ESS Support Services, LLC, ESS, as to all numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the below attached proposal. And number two, the school board rejects the proposal of Community Rehab Associations, Inc., DBA, CRA, as to all proposals and alternatives.
I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 2 absent.
Director of Special Education, SPC Principal.
The board is asked to approve Ron Haichu being assigned as the Director of Special Education/SPC Principal for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year at his current salary.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I need a second.
I will second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 2 absent.
Contract Psychological Evaluation Services. The board is asked to approve granting administration the ability to contract for student psychological evaluation services with Key Solutions and Ray Milky. I need a motion.
So moved.
I need a second. Discussion?
It does not say for how long. In the executive session, you said this was just going to be for the next school year, so which is...
I think that the motion should say that it will be for the rest of this current school year to be, I think that we need to look at the IU services that they have to offer for the next school year. So if we can add that, this would be for the rest of this current school year.
Are you adding that to your motion?
I didn't make the motion.
What,
Mrs. Rhodes?
I have a question about how early in, is there something that has to happen during the summer for IEPs for kids that
Yes.
could be, and I'm not sure how that's going to fall, and so how you define school year, because school year is over June, what, 5th?
Well,
Fiscal year is the 30th.
So I guess what I mean is we need someone tomorrow to start doing this because Mr. Haichu will now be doing this. So we can't really look at other places right now because this is the only thing we were presented. So I would like to start receiving information from the IU to see what they have along with them again, just so that we have that information to decide on for next school year.
Well, I think what I'm trying to tell you, or explain is, and maybe Mr. Haichu or somebody could comment on this, I don't know. I don't know who's out in the audience, I can't see. Of the potential need for this maybe through even the month of August.
But I think her point is we could approve this, say, till June 30th, but perhaps in May or at a May or June meeting, if we are given additional options that we
I
could
apologize, I see your point now.
expand
Yeah.
beyond that.
That's exactly what I meant.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Mr. Haichu? I mean, I think that's important too.
I think the important part of the conversation is the ability to look at and utilize all available resources and options depending on the circumstances at the time. I can tell you, for your knowledge and consideration at this point in time, the Westmoreland Intermediate Unit does currently have a new model provision of school psychological services at various FTEs. So a school district could, for example, purchase a 0.2 FTE, which equates to 1 day a week of services for approximately $22,000, $21,670, I believe. But again, I think there is a utility to having the ability to contract with some of the individuals that are currently on the agenda for evaluations at a, per diem or evaluation cycle as opposed to an FTE. And I think that from my perspective, moving forward in the position of Director of Special Education, I would prefer, if the board would agree, the ability, freedom, and autonomy to have a variety of options from which to choose, depending on the circumstances at the time. And there is need, to Mr. Patonik's point, to do evaluations through the summer. And so the point of the school year end versus the fiscal school year, I think is a good point for the board to consider as well. This year, the total evaluations projected from now to the end of the school year is in excess of 50. I think at this point in time, about 39.
The whole school year is 39, there's 50 left in the next 2 months.
No, that's counting the 39.
There's only, 11 left?
Right now, there are 17 in process, but we also have the early intervention transition evaluations that we have approximately 12 of those. So that 17 plus 12, we have about 29 left between now and the beginning of next school year. We also have PTEs that are currently out that have not been returned by families. So depending on how many of those are returned, that dictates how many we need to get done within the remaining timelines of the school calendar.
So those 29 that have to be done yet, that will be done at $600 each?
No, I'm hoping to continue to do some of the ones that are outstanding at this time. And as I think I had mentioned in my conversation with Mr. Masha, I am certainly able and willing to help out with evaluations in the summertime, time permitting, but I also know that, there are things that the building level principal is tasked with in terms of the comprehensive plan, and so I just need to evaluate the timing that will have available to do those.
So you're saying the more resources...
$600 for the evaluation, and with that, we could report in one phone call to parents, is that correct?
Well, that'll be for me to determine in terms of my conversations with the respective evaluators. So,
It says in the contract, understand that the contract says that there will be an evaluation, a report, and one telephone appointment. You're also required to do an electronic observation, if the observations are required.
I believe that was only one of the proposals, Dr. Fike, I believe that was only one of the proposals that was doing telephone evaluation consults. I think that was from Key.
But what I'm getting at is if you have a person 1 day a week, they can do it all. I mean, they are there for the MDTs, they're there for the consultations with the teachers, they're there for, all the things that follow. I mean, the evaluation is just the first step.
I think it's highly unlikely that a person working 1 day a week, 8 hours, is going to be able to do all of our evaluations, all of our meetings. I think a lot of the meetings are handled by the special education director. In your capacity as special education director, you would be attending IEP meetings and such. We wouldn't be expecting the evaluator necessarily to be at all of those meetings. I mean, I would think that one person working 1 day a week, making $21,000 there's a lot of prep time going into the evaluation. There's the time with the child to evaluate. I mean, how many evaluations could technically one person get done in a school year if they're working 1 day a week?
well, again, it's going to vary by that individual in terms of, the thoroughness of the documentation, the report. I can tell you from my own perspective, it's an arduous process and it's a time-consuming process. I don't know that folks truly understand the time commitment involved in terms of not only the evaluation of the student time itself, but also the time involved in data analysis, interpretation of the data, and then the composition of the evaluation reports, reevaluation reports themselves. There's also typically a lot of follow-up that's required involved in terms of data collection as it relates to getting information back from teachers and other individuals who are providing input for the evaluation process. Typically, we have observational information coming from school counselors and from teachers themselves. So there is a lot of time beyond just the testing time and the meeting time that goes into each of the evaluations that are conducted for a student. Back to your other question about, is the school psychologist needed at the time of the conference? Again, because in my unique situation as a director of special education, having the school psychologist certification, I, in many instances, would probably be able to fulfill the role of both. But typically, you would have a school psychologist as well as the director of special education at the MDT conference, which is separate from the IEP conference. So the school psychologist typically isn't involved in the IEP conference, which is the meeting at which the student's educational plan is developed. But at that MDT conference, you should have representation of the school psychologist to answer any questions related to the testing evaluation process and ultimate interpretation of the data resulting in the determination of eligibility or not.
Well, those were my concerns. Evaluations is step one. There's a whole lot of...
Right.
And it did, Michelle, I sat here and I watched for 2 years, 2 times, getting rid of the aides that were working with the kids. We outsourced them. You see how that worked out. I would caution you to be very, very careful about who you're going to outsource this stuff.
I do think both of these people that we are looking at are being used at other districts in Westmoreland County right now. I believe Mr. Novikov has reached out to those districts to see how that is working for those 2 districts. So
I can speak to the credentials of the one individual, having worked directly with that individual over the course of my career. So I have the utmost confidence in both of the resources that Mr. Novikov has researched and brought to your attention for consideration.
Can I ask a quick question? So the resolution tonight is to basically allow Mr. Heitsch the authority to work with either one of these proposals, correct? Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't picking between one or the other, that he can then pick whoever fits the needs that he has. Okay.
I think that's the point, so that even if one's
And it could
overwhelmed.
potentially be needing to use both
Right.
sources.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't picking between one or the other, so.
Everything has a specific timeline, so if he needs something done, and he needs to know that that person can get those things to him in a
Absolutely.
timely manner.
Works for me.
Right. Right, and he and Mr. Novikov have done a great job of keeping the district in compliance with those over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions I can assist with? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haji.
Okay, did we have a motion on this?
Yes, in a second.
Okay.
But were we
Roll call.
changing the motion?
Yeah, we were going to
Oh,
have.
we'll change the motion.
We were going to limit it to June 30th, is that what this was?
Well, the way he explained it, I think that we would keep as many people on, I'm going to say on retainer, I know that's not correct, but I would think that we would keep them on next school year even if we add more people to it. So I would just say we motion to approve them.
I would hope that we would be able to add IU services
Right.
and others. Yes.
Right.
Because we're not obligated to they have to do a certain amount or anything like that, so, okay.
As needed.
Mr. Haichu, I just have one more question. The IU services, there still will be an hourly rate for IU services as well, correct? Like, there's this FTE we can hire, but we could also still use them on an hourly basis, correct?
That's correct. Their current hourly rate is $90 an hour.
Okay. And roughly, how many hours would be for an evaluation?
For an evaluation from start to finish, again, depending on the thoroughness of the evaluator and the time and effort and energy they put into the interpretation. And I'm unique in the sense that I spend a lot of time in terms of making the eligibility determination because I want to ensure that I'm looking at everything, okay? But in terms of the evaluation itself, for me, with the testing instruments and batteries that I use, it typically consumes in the neighborhood of 3.5 hours for the evaluation, direct evaluation of the student. Beyond that, it takes typically about 4 hours to generate the evaluation report. And generally, we look at an hour for the scheduling of the conference and the execution, the conduction of the conference.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion?
No, I'm having a discussion, Michelle. Is there something, did I miss something? Is there a proposal from the IU union?
No, there is not.
So we only have one choice.
We have two choices, and we're voting on both of them together.
What's the other choice?
Key Solution and Ray Milky.
They're not the same thing?
No, they're not.
What's the difference?
They're two separate entities. One is Key Solutions, and one is an individual by the name of Ray Milky.
Who's the psychologist in Key Solutions?
I'm sure I'm going to assume that they're an organization, and there's more than one evaluator.
That is correct.
I have these here.
Is there any other discussion?
This one from Milky says at the end that their confidentiality ends with the expiration or termination of the agreement. But I mean, indemnification against us, I guess, will survive the termination of this agreement. We have to provide complete updated educational file, the observation, in electronic format, teaching and making service provider information, evaluations, and recommendations in electronic format. So that's one. The other one is Key Solutions. individual, Key Solutions is a group, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes,
So you're contracting with an individual if you go do it, right?
we're contracting with both of them. That is the motion that is on the floor.
Contracting with both of them.
Yes.
How do you do what to which one?
That will be up to Mr. Haichu, and that, because we're not contracting with a certain amount, and he will base that on the availability of the evaluators. Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
If you hear the IU, the answer is no.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries 6 yes, 1 no, 2 absent.
Adoption of school meeting changes.
Motion to suspend the rules and amend school or board policy, to amend board policy as to physical presence of a quorum of members required for public meeting and executive sessions, and provide means of board member and others and public by only virtual means participation for public meetings and executive sessions for set period. The board approves this procedural motion to take up consideration of the substantive resolution below, entitled Resolution to Amend Board Policy as to Physical Presence of a Quorum of Members Required for Public Meeting and Executive Sessions, and providing means of board member and others in public by only virtual means participation for public meetings and executive sessions for a set period.
This is if you want to discuss it. It's procedural. If you don't want to discuss it, then you don't even do number 6. If you want to go on to consider number 6, you would approve this. Which is in effect number 7, to deal with the month of May by virtual means because of the continuing problems with the COVID in the buildings.
So to break it all down, we're discussing going virtual for May meetings?
Yes.
Because we're afraid that the buildings are going to be closed and we're not going to be able to have our budget meetings, which are very important to have.
That would be one consideration. The other consideration is just the additional load that you put on individuals and interactions between people. We haven't been having much of a presence here, and I don't know whether that's good or bad. I guess it depends on how you look at it, as to whether that's cutting down on spread, but it doesn't seem like the public wants to attend, I guess. I don't know how to interpret it.
So, just to be sure I understand, we need to suspend the rules.
This vote is to decide whether or not you want to talk about this. If it passes with 5 votes, then you can debate number 6. But that's going to take 6 votes if you want to enact it tonight. Does that help?
Yes. So I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, or discussion, I'm sorry.
I took the time to go back and look through all the meetings, all of my agendas and all the voting meetings and discussion motions, and I'm pretty sure this is the 15th time this is appeared. 15th time in the last year. I just went back a year. 15 times this has been up and down and up and down and up and down, and changed and changed and changed and changed and changed. I think this is the 15th time this has been voted on. Well, if this passed, then maybe not. If we make it 16, I guess maybe not.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike?
No.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
No.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries. 5 yes, 2 no, 2 absent.
Is there on this, I'm sorry, let's see, revised substantive motion, adoption of school board meeting changes, substantive resolution amending policy?
Is that long?
Do we need to read the whole thing? It's available on board docs for anyone who wants to see it.
I can point out some relevant portions to you, because it does incorporate, a lot of this was put here so that you could go to one place and see what was involved with it.
Can we read the recommended action first? I think that will give people an understanding first of what we're talking about. We haven't read that yet. Mr. Masha, can you read that?
Resolution to amend board policy as the physical presence of a quorum of members required for public meeting and executive sessions, and providing means of board members and others in public by only virtual means participation for public meetings and executive sessions for set period.
So the definition for virtual is there. It's the same as before. As I mentioned, that you're above 100 again for Westmoreland and Fayette on the incidence rate and the positivity rates of 10 or higher. Be resolved that, and the opening paragraph is important. The rules and board policy are suspended as to board policy 03 to provide for the number of meetings and attendance at meetings. The electronic communications amended in part in order to permit the attendance by board members by only virtual means and for witnessing and participation of the public as follows. And so then in number 2, on the days and at the time set forth in resolution adopted on February 18, 2021, monthlies at 7. However, there is the ability to and have special meetings, and it'll apply until, and I believe the insert's going to be here May 31st, 2021, at which you'll revert to a combination of physical presence. So it'd be through May 31st, I think it should say, instead of until. But your actual meeting in May is before that. And number 4, commenters and members would be participating by Zoom. Again, you have in number 5 the procedures for phone-ins. And in 6A and 6B, in addition to Section 2 above, executive sessions may be on non-Thursday meetings as permitted under the open meeting law and may be all virtual or pursuant to the above method based upon scheduling and safety and availability considerations and the difficulty of having adequate time in the 6 p.m. or former 6:30 p.m. starting times or 7 p.m. So you could be scheduling for 6, 6:30 or 7. And then item 8 is to continue accessing through live streaming for the public. Paragraph 12, I repeated the policy about walk-ons and restated it. The difference being that you need to designate a person and a phone number for phone-ins. Right now, or previously, it had been Mr. Pushkar, and there's difficulty with, I believe, Mrs. Tarson being able to try to keep track of the minutes of the meeting and handling the function of the extra phone-ins during the meeting. This Provision shall apply when public voting meetings are done by solely virtual or solely physical presence, or a combination of both during the period of the pandemic. So that part it's meant to cover all of those until you further decide it. So the one insert that's needed is an individual who would be the phone in person and their phone numbers, which appears in sections A and B there. But this would require 6 votes to pass.
And this would be taking us back to virtual meetings for the month of May.
Yes.
Due to possible building closures. We did get some numbers earlier that I can share of one of the reasons why we're looking at this. Currently, SPC has 1 case. We're awaiting 1 more result. The high school has 4 cases, and we're awaiting 2 results. What is our number for the high school needing to close?
4. But those are probably from before the break. Too,
Okay.
so.
The middle school has 7, and we're awaiting 1. SES has 7, and we're awaiting 2. Currently, we have 10 students, 10 people quarantined at SPC, 10 quarantined at the high school, 35 quarantined at the elementary school, and 8 quarantined at the middle school. Both counties are now in substantial, and basically this is just to alleviate the situation of needing to cancel meetings because a building is closed. We have a lot of things coming up. We have a business manager that we need to hire. We have budget meetings that are happening, and then our regular 2-time-a-month meeting that's occurring. So we were just trying to alleviate any possible building closures so that we would not need to reschedule meetings. So this would just run until the end of May, and then once school is out, the last day of school is the 4th, and then there wouldn't be a need to close buildings. So we would pretty much not need to worry about how we were advertising moving forward then.
I have a question before panicking. So if a building would close, it would only be for 2 days?
Correct. Correct. But the building could close on Wednesday, which would affect our Thursday meeting.
Right. Yes.
So, but yes.
All they're hearing is, we're going to close.
Yeah, it's 2 days. It's 2 days.
For thorough cleaning.
Yes.
And it's building specific, like
Yeah.
Yes.
it could be just one building.
Not District 1.
everybody.
Okay, I just want people to know.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Masha, since we have this new videographer that we just hired, and they'll be starting,
Actually, he's up there right now.
so could they do the phone call? Since they won't have to be here video?
I don't see any reason why they could not accept those calls, yes.
Okay. Perfect.
And that would be for the month of May.
Would it be the same phone number?
I don't understand this. If
We,
school's in session and we have a meeting, it's still going to be the Zoom meeting.
Correct, because of advertising.
It takes about 4 days to go and actually accomplish the publication, depending upon what day of the week it is.
And who else is eliminated under that system? In other words, if the schools are in session, the board's the only thing that doesn't...
For the month of May, Dr. Fike. So technically, right now, as we stand, it would be 3 meetings that we're discussing.
I guess I just don't get it. If the schools function, we're not going to function.
Well, remember, Dr. Fike, last week, how I kept trying to come up with a way that we could advertise that if schools closed, will be virtual? And Mr. Botonic said there's not a way we can do that. Because I thought we could advertise and say, our meeting will be in person, unless the building's closed, then it will be virtual. And he says we cannot do that. That's why we're at this virtual.
Advertised on the internet.
I'm sorry?
I thought the advertisements were done on the internet.
No, they have
They have
to,
to
according to
still be
school
done in the
code, they have to be in the
newspaper.
newspaper. I think that's the problem.
Well, I'm looking around at the vast audience.
The problem is if the building is closed, we should not be in the building if we're eliminating education from the building.
I'm saying if the building is not closed. I can't understand that. I don't understand.
So, I mean, if the building is not closed, we can't advertise both ways, according to Mr. Patonic. That's the problem. we have to take into account that the building may possibly be closed, and how do we advertise for that? That's where we are.
Yeah, I guess I would challenge that. I would say that a reasonable person could understand that the meeting would be under one circumstance and moved to Zoom under another circumstance.
Is it possible? Is it possible to have the advertisement specifically state that we're in person unless the building is closed, then the meeting would be virtual, and that decision would be posted on the school website by, say, 3 o'clock or whatever particular time of a day, so stating that if it needs to be, it would be stated on that date by 3
But
o'clock.
then it's not 24 hours.
But you're saying we are being in person. Unless the building is closed, we will be virtual. And so those are your two options. And you would find out that day by no later than whatever time that it would be whichever choice.
And when that whichever choice occurs is not 24 hours, and it's not in the newspaper.
That's what I tried to say last week, Mrs. Raymond, that's what we should be able to do. That
I think
makes
that's
sense.
Well, and my concern is that, if you were dealing with a private entity, that would be one thing. But in the month of May, you're going to be passing a tentative budget. And if you miss the deadline for that, or you do it by means that turns out not to be correct with hindsight by some judge, it's a big problem. And do you want to gamble with that? I think you need to be careful.
Can I ask you a question? What problem did we ever have? What has ever happened with this advertising?
Well, I think since you follow the law the way it's written, that's why you're not having problems.
At the time.
I'm not sure I'm understanding. Well, we can't predict in advance exactly when you're going to have a building closure. And we don't know how close that will be in juxtaposition to having a previously set board meeting. And if it's too close, there's the problem.
It's fine, I just don't think people better.
Until they rewrite it, is it Pennsylvania Sunshine Act or public meeting law?
Open meeting.
Public meeting law. We have to follow the existing law. However inconvenient it might seem.
I need a motion.
So moved.
I need a second. This is a motion to return, just for the month of May, to virtual board meetings, just so we're clear. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries 6 yes, 1 no, 2 absent.
District phone system. That's what we just did, right?
You took care of 7.
Yeah.
Number 1, the board authorizes terminating the contract with Consolidated Communications at a time not to disrupt the district's installation of new phone system. And number 2, the board authorizes entering into a contract with Full Service Network according to the below attached quote in a form acceptable to the solicitor.
Which is now public because it's been handed to all of you and it's available for the public down there. It just needs to be amended to change that one date to 2021. So that's what you're approving.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I need a second.
I will second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 2 absent.
Athletic bids.
The board is asked to consider approval for the athletic department to place an advertisement for bid supplies for the 2021-2022 school year. The notice will be published on April 26th, May 3rd, May 10th, 2021 in the approved school district newspapers. The bids will be open on Monday, May 17th, 2021.
At what time?
What time are you available, Mr. Tony?
Well, you pick it. I didn't know what you wanted to aim for.
I'm available all day, so 1 o'clock.
Fine.
1 o'clock.
Write up an advertisement for them.
And it has to be in the advertisement, that's why I brought it up.
I need a motion.
And the location where it's going to be open.
I would say the middle school library.
So the bids will be open on Monday, May 17th, 2021 at 1 o'clock in the middle school library. I need a motion.
I will make the motion.
I need a second. Discussion.
We assume that those sports will be canceled.
No sports were canceled this year, were they? They were postponed, but not canceled. Roll call.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Policy posting.
Board is asked to authorize the administration to post for 30 days the following policies. Policy 103, discrimination/Title IX sexual harassment affecting students. Policy 104, discrimination/Title IX sexual harassment affecting staff. Policy 247, hazing. Policy 249, bullying, cyberbullying. And Policy 832, educational equity.
Need a motion.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion.
I would just like to bring up again, I don't know if it's something that we need to vote upon, but Mrs. O'Rear and I had discussed, she had brought up the idea of having the group to discuss how we can implement the policy 832, educational equity. I'm not sure if that has to be a voted upon motion, maybe for the next board meeting, but I just want to keep reminding you that we talked about that last week.
Could that just be formed, Ms. Petoni, could that?
I think we should
Could just be
approve.
formed
I
through
think
the-
you should approve that.
Okay.
Okay, so could we have it on the agenda for next meeting? Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Board policies.
The board is asked to approve the policies that were posted for 30 days. These policies are as follows: 800, records management; 801, public records; 802, school organization; 803, school calendar; 804, school day; 805, emergency preparedness and response; 805.1, relations with law enforcement agencies; 805.2, school security personnel; 806, child abuse; 807, opening exercises, flag displays; 808, food service; 810, transportation; 810.1, school bus drivers and school commercial motor vehicle drivers; 810.2, transportation, video, audio recording; 810.3, school vehicle drivers; 811, bonding; 812, property insurance; 813, other insurance; 814, copyright material; 815, acceptable use of computer network, digital technology, and internet; 818, contracted services personnel; 819, suicide awareness, prevention, and response; 822, automated external defibrillator, AED/cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR; 823, naloxone; 824, maintaining professional adult/student boundaries. 827, conflict of interest. 828, fraud. And 830, breach of computerized personal information.
I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski? Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Posting of positions for ESY.
Adelphi.
Thank you, Ms.
Oh, I'm sorry. Adelphi agreement.
Board is asked to authorize administration to continue with an agreement with Adelphi for the 2021-2022 school year.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I need a second.
I have a second.
Discussion.
It's part of our budget, correct?
Yes.
We pay by the student, or
Yes. We currently do have students enrolled in it.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Posting of positions for ESY.
Board is asked to authorize the administration to post the positions for extended school year for the summer of 2021.
I need a motion.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Van drivers with Quest.
The board is asked to approve at the request of Quest Transit, Charlotte Yutzi and Angie White as new van drivers for Quest. Clearances are current and on file.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
A second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Middle school head boys soccer coach.
The board is asked to consider the hiring of Adam Butts as the head coach for the middle school boys soccer at a supplemental salary of $3,017. All clearances are on file. This is at the recommendation of the athletic director.
I need a motion.
I will make the motion.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
Middle school assistant baseball coach.
Board is asked to consider the approval of Drew Ledbetter as middle school assistant baseball coach at a supplemental salary of $2,605.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I need a second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 absent. Motion carries.
Job description for school security and police.
The board is asked to approve the job descriptions for school safety and security coordinator, school police supervisor, school police officer, and school security guard.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Fike? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes?
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 7 yes, 2 absent.
School Safety and Security Coordinator and School Police Supervisor.
The board is asked to approve Greg Kiefer as the school safety security coordinator and school police supervisor as a 10-month employee at a salary of $54,000 per year.
I need a motion.
So moved.
I need a second. Discussion.
Are we saying what agreement he's being put into?
Can that be part of the motion?
Should be.
Are we looking at Act 93? Go.
It was not part of the motion, that's why I asked if we should make it part of the motion. What position, what agreement he will fall under?
You mean plan?
Plans.
Plan, I'm sorry.
The Act
What
93 plan.
Yes.
Is he getting 50,000 plus benefits, or is it straight to before, or?
If he goes into a plan, then he would fall under that plan's benefits.
That's not shown here. That doesn't show here.
Correct. That's why I asked the question.
And I just want to know what we're voting on. Is it just the salary? No benefits?
We're also, we would like it to be part of the motion that he be added to the Act 93 plan, which would then entitle him to benefits in the Act 93 plan.
Shouldn't that be in the motion?
That's what we're saying.
That's what we just said, yeah.
Do you amend your motion to state that, Mrs.
To
Rhodes?
include that, yes.
And were you the second? Are you okay?
Heather, yes.
Okay.
Before we vote, I do want to say so that everyone knows, although the rest of the security and school police do not fall under the Act 93 plan, we are creating a plan where our intention is that they will fall under that plan. We are looking at it at the next board meeting and discussing it. We've been discussing it for a couple of weeks. And that my plan is to have that done by the end of hopefully May.
I'm not clear on this. So if we go through this, he goes back 93, he gets 13 sick days or 12 sick days, and he gets all that vacation, and he becomes like a principal, that he would get the same benefits as a principal.
That will hopefully change in our next meet and discuss with Act 93, that there would be a Tier 1 and Tier 2.
Did you put a technology worker in here?
We did, yes, we did.
That person would get all those benefits.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Now, for payroll purposes, the motion says a 10-month employee, the salary says $54,000 per year. Now, is that $54,000 prorated
It's $54,000 for 10 months.
for 10 months?
Part of that agreement is he also will work during ESY. And there are football games that he will be at. That's all part of
This
his job
salary.
description and agreement.
Prom, things, major events. Major events such as prom and
Right. So the purpose of this is the board needs to decide if they want to do this and if they want to put it in Act 93, and that's what we're voting on.
That is the motion, for $54,000 per year and to add him to Act 93. That's the motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion?
Is it effective July 1st?
All benefits.
Yes, Catherine, yes.
It would be effective immediately, just like Mr. Smithola was.
So his new pay rate is going to affect immediately. So you might want to put an effective date in the motion.
I didn't make the motion. Mrs. Rhodes did.
Do you agree to amend that to be effective immediately? Do you agree to amend to make it effective immediately?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Feig?
I'm going to pass. I don't really understand how this works, so I'm going to pass.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 6 yes, 1 pass, 2 absent.
Advertising for custodial supervisor.
Board is asked to authorize the administration to advertise for the position of custodial supervisor.
Thought maybe that was making you sad.
No.
Or maybe you didn't want to relinquish
Far
those
from it, far from it.
I need a motion.
I was breaking up from happiness.
I'll second.
Discussion.
I do have discussion. Do we have a set salary for this person?
We do not.
Okay. Is that something we should
We have
before we interview?
we have a rough idea, and I think the Buildings and Grounds Committee will be making a recommendation after we meet.
Okay.
It was also suggested to us that we could use an existing supervisor of maintenance to fill this position.
That was suggested by Mr. Marnell, who is not part of the Buildings and Grounds Committee and was not part of the board decision to separate the positions, which we already voted upon. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Dr. Fike?
No.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, 6 yes, 1 no, 2 absent.
We are going to allow 5 minutes.
Michelle, real quick before we do that, 5 minutes.
Just, we can do that while we're waiting.
Oh.
That's 5 minutes. I just wanted to announce that we're going to leave 5 minutes right now, that anybody that wanted to call in for citizens' comments at the end will be able to. That number is on the agenda. I believe you can find it.
Citizens' comments at the closing exercises.
If you click on your agenda at the bottom, there is a phone number. I can give it to you all, 724-887
2065.
2065. And I'm sorry, Mrs. Raymond had a couple of things she would like to say.
Oh, I just wanted to first make mention of the amazing job that our girls softball team is doing. They are undefeated, and I believe they won 14-5 this evening. And they've been very impressive, and so I just wanted to kind of call them out for that. And then I also wanted to bring attention to an article I saw in the Post-Gazette that I believe was yesterday. It was talking about schools that had been recognized by the National Association of Music Merchants Foundation as having an outstanding commitment to music education, and Southmoreland was one of the districts that had been recognized. So I think we have a wonderful music education program here, and it's fantastic to see it getting recognized. So just wanted to make note of that.
Thank you.
I have a board issue that I'd like to ask about.
Go ahead.
Once again, how many board meetings can a board member be absent and there is no action taken?
Is that directed to me or who?
I'm not sure. Who are you asking? Are you asking Mr. Kotonik that?
It doesn't matter. I just would like to know the answer to the question, and if in fact that is an issue, what action is being taken to review?
Actually, can I like piggyback off of that question in terms of in terms of any board member that is an elected official who the public or anyone has any opinion about how they're performing as a board member, is there any action that can be taken generally, whether it be for excessive absences or just anything that the public has any concern with? Is there any action that can be taken against an elected school board director? Because I think that would all fall under, would be a general question for anything.
Well, I can answer the question about the vacancy. which is under section 319 of the school code. If it appears from the minutes that a member has been absent from 2 regularly scheduled successive monthly meetings, then a procedure should be followed because of some court cases of the board voting to send a notice to the absent member. And so I think it would appear something like, whereas it appears from the minutes that a member has been absent from regularly scheduled monthly meetings being advertised as regular monthly meetings as approved at the December reorganization meeting as follows. State what they are. And then the resolution would be along the lines, the secretary is authorized and directed to send a notice by certified mail to the member to show cause, if any, they may have, as set forth in the school code, section 319, for that person's non-attendance on those dates, if it be for the reasons therein, namely being detained by sickness or prevented by necessary absence from the district, and proof thereof. And then I think you should designate a time and day that you would entertain that proof and explanation. So you would designate a particular day at a particular time, and upon failure to do so, the board would proceed to declare that that office is vacant as director.
But that's not something that automatically happens.
No, you have to get started.
So, and a board member is given certain extenuating circumstances.
Well, the school code gives you the excuses. So if you have a situation where there have been 2 missed, then a member can make a motion, which would be, need to be second, to go and send a formal notice that it looks like you've missed date A and date B. We'll, deal with this on such and such a date and time. And then they're put on notice to have their explanation based upon the criteria structure of the school code. It would not be, there are cases in which boards have attempted to, without an advance notice, the member not being present, to declare the vacancy, and those have not been upheld. You have to give them an opportunity to explain, if they choose to.
You had said that there were regular meetings. Did you say it differently last week? There were voting meetings?
Well, a regular meeting is a voting meeting, and let me be clear about that. In the reorganization meeting, you set your schedule for the year, so that's what's fair to judge people by.
Okay.
And you have regular meetings being declared for your, in most instances, second and third Thursdays, except July and December. You have special meetings, and then you've also added to those as you go along for special voting meetings, but because that's not established in advance, it's not fair to count missing something like that. So it would be your monthly, in simpler terms, your monthly business meeting, already advertised in advance.
Okay. That answer your question, Dr. Feynman?
It does answer it. At the beginning of the year, after the organization meeting, we are given a list of regular meetings that is provided, that whole list of regular So somebody here has to be able to take responsibility to follow the law. That's what I'm saying, it's the law. We have been functioning as a board member for several months now. And I don't know if it's intentionally that way in Pennsylvania.
Is there any other discussion? We did wait our 5 minutes and we've had no call-ins. Any other board discussion? Okay, citizens' comments? You're reneging on your deal there, Jan.
I don't think that I did that.
Jan Kiefer, 628 Homestead Avenue. I'm concerned that we're sleepwalking back into school lockdowns that could go on through the summer and through the fall because of the mathematics involved here, with your tracing and all that. And this is the worst fear that we've had for the last year, and it's coming on just as I've seen it coming along. It really matters where you get your information, and it's pretty easy to see where people get their information by how they express themselves in public when they do something that's just contradictory to information that's out there that they're simply not aware of. And I can see that in this board's action and in the community's action. But let me be specific what I'm asking you to do. We're acting on a declaration of emergency from Governor Wolf. Governor Wolf has based his decision on what the medical community is telling him. That opinion is dramatically being opposed and contradicted around the world by, as I say every week, by potential bodies of people. If you were aware of that, of this debate that's going on in the medical community and the political community, it would show in your comments and address to this policy. What shows is you're going by the fact that we're in a world pandemic, yet the statistics show, if you've had time to produce these, that there's no increase in death. We don't have increased, let me be clear, maybe I'm not saying this enough. I understand that there's a coronavirus. I understand that when you put on a microscope, you see, I'm not a denier in that sense. I'm a denier in everything else that your government has told you about this. The lockdown, the effectiveness, that is policy before science. The masks are policy before science. It's like putting a chain link fence up to keep mosquitoes out of your yard. And this is not opinion that is not been debunked. Sure, we have sick people. My wife came home from work today and said that she sees all these sick people in the hospital. And I said, well, you understand that these people are saying that 80% of those people would not be there if the government were not restricting the availability of the ivermectin and the hydrochloroquine. And it goes deeper than that. If your school nurse and your school policy realize that 60% of our children and our citizens are obese, that's a big factor. You're going to be deficient in vitamin D if you're obese. Instead of the teachers getting up there and getting a shot in public, I would like to stand and call in tonight if there's time and say, here's what I've done to actually increase my immune system, to change my lifestyle, to take me out of that category. And for a teacher to come up here and say, yes, we have done our homework, we are not, when we watch TV, we realize that it's just 90% one side thing. I watch TV closely now just so I can make this statement in public. You'll have Tucker Carlson attack a vaccination a little bit, but he's not anywhere near what these signers of the, for instance, the Great Barrington or whatever declaration. These people are are nowhere near the mainstream media. And the people that I've followed for years that are on these vaccination issues and on public health issues are the ones that are most censored from the social media. And when these people do come out, they're attacked, they're destroyed. And but nonetheless, we have a strong body of academics now that have a tremendous case that obviously no one on this board, with the exception of Dr. Pike, is aware of. And you have made it eminently impossible for me to get beyond 5 minutes of the stress. I'm not a public speaker, but you put me in your wellness committee, turn on reporters so that the community can see it. And we have a long, drawn-out 2 or 3 stage. It might take 3 meetings. It might take emails back and forth. We're going to come out with a different set of facts. And Mr. Masha, you, as the leader of the community, you have a respect. You know, this is academic malfeasance in my sense, because no one on this board would have the courage, or has shown the courage, to give the opportunity to debate in public, and we'll see what you know about the issues that we're raising up here, why these lockdowns are ruining our community and on.
Time is up, Mr. Kiefer, thank you.
I'm not done.
Your
I'm
time?
not done until this board starts.
You're done. You're done. Your 5 minutes is up, you're done. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I second.
All those in favor?
When are we going to have our meeting? When am I going to have a chance? Vince, why can't I talk? You know how hard it is to stand here and try to debate when you're not trained to do that? School teachers can come in here and do it. They can do that. I can't. When I was
This isn't a debate. Mr. Kiefer, can you remove him so that